Hey guys, Speed here, and today I'll be going over the top 5 things you should try in patch 7.21. These builds are improved because of the changes, and should definitely be used in your pubs so that you can catch your opponents off guard and start winning MMR. Before we jump into the main heroes, the top 5 heroes that I've picked out, I'm going to give a few honorable mentions. First off is Lycan. Lycan's win rate is up 6%, and he did receive a few changes that made his wolves stronger in the early game. Next up is Ursa. Ursa received a movement speed buff, which is amazing for a hero that has large issues closing the gap and keeping on top of heroes. Alright, now let's get straight into the first hero. The first hero I'm going to recommend is support Enchantress. In the previous patch, Enchantress was pretty much irrelevant after her nerfs. In the lane, Enchant had a longer cooldown than duration. This caused a lot of problems because Enchantress would either not have a creep to take over or not be able to keep the creep that she wanted in the lane because it would die before the cooldown came off. Now in the new patch, this is no longer a problem. Because of this, I would highly recommend you try this hero as a 5. For items, you're going to want to buy the Courier, 1 Ward, Blightstone, Tangos, and a Clarity. After this, in the mid game, or even in the early game if you're doing very well, you're going to want to consider buying Bracers. The main purpose of Enchantress is to stay alive, get off your enchants, potentially purge some spells, and throw a ton of impetuses. After that, you want to buy Treads, either a 4-staff or a medallion, and then if you're crushing, consider a Dragonlance or a Midas. Next up is one of my personal favorites. I can't say I've played this hero, but I have a friend who showed me this idea last patch, and it's something I've been fascinated with for quite a while. Specifically, I'm recommending Chaos Knight mid. Chaos Knight mid is quite weird. This hero is pretty tanky, so it does well against magical damage mid laners, and it has a lifesteal ability with Chaos Strike. Now that it's a 4-second cooldown at level 1, you can constantly regain HP in the laning stage and just sustain your way through. I think one of the main problems for Chaos Knight in the laning stage was that you would be constantly forced to fight and often come out under-leveled or under-farmed. This crushes this hero. Chaos Knight really needs to come off to a decent start and can be a pretty good roaming hero, and for that, I think he's actually a good mid laner. If you buy a few Bracers, Treads, and then maybe an Armlet, you can roam around the map, pick off the side lanes, and just be so much tankier than everyone else. With these Bracers and Treads, you're going to have more than 1500 HP and a 5-second slow that is pretty much not escapable for the majority of heroes in the early game and mid game. But let's dive now more into depth into the item build. So as I mentioned, you're going to want to buy 2 Bracers. You can replace one of these for Wand if you think it's a good Wand game, as Chaos Knight does have quite large mana issues. Next, I'm going to recommend Treads. To be perfectly honest, I'm not certain if Treads are better than Phase Boots. It's something you'll have to test out if you're interested in this hero, but for now, I think it's great to just be threatening with the absurd amount of HP that Treads give, and the attack speed is good for farming still. Next up, don't hate me, but Midas. I honestly think this item is pretty good, and the commonality between the heroes that I'm recommending, and the reason I don't think they were played much in previous patches, is they did not have the farming potential as other cores. You couldn't pick Chaos Knight against heroes like Terrorblade, or Luna, or Anti-Mage, because you would get out-farmed. There's pretty much no way to keep the tempo up. Your hero doesn't push towers particularly well, especially considering you're going to be behind on items. So if you can get off to a good start and have 2 Bracers and Treads, you're going to hit hard simply because you have high levels in your W and probably a few levels in stun and E. So what is important to note is that your role is to control the early game by farming the jungle and potentially roaming the side lanes, but more importantly, keeping an eye on your farms so that when it goes into the mid and late game, you still have a BKB, a heart, your armlet, and Midas is a great way to make sure you don't throw off that tempo. I think for a lot of low MMR players, to mid MMR players, to even high MMR players, Midas is a great way in pubs to keep your farm steady. I briefly mentioned the items when I was talking about Midas that I think you should buy next, but just to clarify again, you want Armlet, BKB, and Heart. These items are all great, and in some games you're going to want to consider Manta as well. If you're feeling a little bit crazy, just as an honorable mention item for CK, I would also recommend Solar Crest. It's great because it gives you mana regen, it gives you mana pool, and you can reduce the armor if you are chasing down by quite significant amounts, which leads you to one-shot many heroes in the game. Next up, we have Lifestealer. I actually think Lifestealer can be played as a safe lane or mid lane hero. The reason I think it's quite decent in the mid lane now is with the movement speed buff and armor buff, you can avoid taking a lot of right clicks, as well as you have lifesteal, so you can sustain the lane quite well. Lifestealer is also up 9% on win rate. That is insane, 9%. I think this hero, not including Io, is probably the most buffed hero of the patch. His changes were somewhat minimal, right? Only movement speed, or seemingly minimal I should say, movement speed and armor. But for a hero like Lifestealer, this makes all the difference, because it makes his potentially awful laning stage against specific heroes quite a bit better, as he can close the gap and resist a lot of harass. For items, I'm not going to go into depth, but because of the movement speed buff, I think you definitely should be going right click. With phase boots, you have over 400 movement speed, which is absolutely insane for chasing. So after you get your phase boots, you just want to build some damage and chase people down. These damage items include Armlet, Deso, and then AC. Next up, I'm going to recommend Core Night Stalker. Night Stalker didn't receive a heavy buff, but now his ultimate gives unobstructed vision. This is quite nice because it's similar to when he had Ags. You could just see everything and take over fights. It's very important to note that I'm saying that you should play Night Stalker as a core. I don't think this hero is particularly good as a support, simply for the fact that his laning presence is extremely weak. As a result, if you can farm for the first daytime and get into the nighttime, when you have items, you'll have a large impact. That's why I'm going to recommend that you buy phase boots, wand, and urn as your first items. Just because you are a core doesn't mean that you can't fight. When the first nighttime hits, if you have your ultimate and you have levels in your slow and your hunter in the night, you should be looking to make plays, as you're one of the strongest heroes on the map. For the next items, I would highly recommend Midas. It's funny that I'm saying this because now I've said this for 2 heroes, and people are going to hate me. They're going to say in the comments, you're crazy, you're ruining my pubs. People are all going to go Midas. Well, hopefully that's not the case, but I think for Enchantress and Night Stalker, these are very good items because the heroes don't have innate ways of farming quickly. Night Stalker has no way of pushing out waves, so when he's roaming, you're going to be stronger than most of the other heroes on the map regardless. So if you have a Midas, you'll keep up in farm, and you'll get great attack speed in synergy with your phase boots. For larger items, you're going to want to consider Halberd, BKB, and then Satanic. If the game goes very late, then you want to consider buying some damage item like MKB or Daedalus. And last but not least, we have Shadow Demon position 4. Shadow Demon is easily one of my favorite supports. He won me MMR when I was 3k all the way up to 5k as my go-to support. However, the hero got pretty heavily nerfed when Shadow Poison had a large increase in mana cost from 35 to 50 many patches ago. Now, level 1 Shadow Poison is 35 again. It does scale up to 50 once you get it to level 4, but what's important is that you can actually use it effectively as a harass tool again. I'm going to recommend that you try Shadow Demon more specifically as a position 4. I don't think the hero is great as a position 5, as often you want a ton of levels to make this hero effective. If you feel like that's not a problem for you, go ahead, try position 5, but often with many safe laners, your laning presence is really bad. I don't even think the Shadow Poison changes really changes that heavily, but if you compare it in the offlane with like a hero such as Centaur or Tidehunter, you'll do just fine. So what you should note first is that your starting items are very important. You want to start with plenty of clarities and mangoes so that you can spam Shadow Poison. Just because the mana cost was lowered doesn't mean you can spam it without thought of running out of mana. So it is very important that you buy clarities, mangoes, and you spam this spell as much as you can from out of range so that you don't give them stick charges. Next, you're going to want to consider buying bracers. This is just really good on some supports like Shadow Demon, where heroes are going to try to jump you, because if they don't jump you, you will disrupt who they jump. If you don't feel like this is a problem and they don't have jumping heroes, then consider just buying an Aether Lens, a Blink Dagger, a Force Staff, or a Glimmer Cape. These are all very cheap items that give you mobility in the fights and will let you get 5 stacks of Shadow Poison with no problem. And for larger items, you're going to want to consider buying Ags and even Hex. You are a position 4 hero, so you can buy pretty much any item you want that fits the game, but Ags is definitely one of the cooler items on Shadow Demon, as it lets you have 3 ultimates and is extremely effective in games where slows are crucial. And before I end and go into the outro, I just want to say that when you're playing Shadow Demon, it is so important to make stacks. Your hero, as a support, can take stacks very effectively, especially once you have mana boots. It's not a problem. You can use Shadow Demon, Poison, even level 4. So what is important is that you can keep your farm up and help your carries farm as well. Shadow Poison is one of the best stacking spells in the game, and I would definitely recommend you stack with it. Thank you guys so much for spending the time to watch my video. I hope you learned a few new heroes that you can implement into your pubs, and test out. I think these builds are very fun, especially Chaos Knight mid, Lifestealer mid, and Night Stalker mid. They can all be extremely fun because you can control the tempo of the game and be unkillable in the lane. If you learn anything about Dota at all, please like and subscribe, and consider commenting if you feel like I forgot any hero that could be really strong in this patch. Thanks for watching.